What cuts deeper than hearing your own child whisper, "Dad is nothing but dead weight now"? I am Martin Cole, 69 years old. And last week I learned my daughter and her husband were planning my exile, as if I were an old sofa, too heavy to move. They thought I would never find out. But the phone line was still open. And I heard every word about the nursing home, about selling my house, about how quickly they could spend what I built with my hands. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the scarred wood where my late wife once kneaded bread for our family. The same table where I signed loan papers to pay for Caroline's college. The same table where I taught her fractions with pennies when she was 9. Now it had become the place where my heart cracked open. Do you know what it feels like when decades of sacrifice are reduced to a price tag? When your own flesh and blood discusses your life not as love, but as real estate? That night, I folded the deed into an envelope, my hands trembling but my mind sharp. If they believed I was helpless, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Because I am not gone yet, and I will not let them bury me alive while they measure the square footage of my house. I was not always the bitter man you just heard. There was a time when my life was warm and full. A time when this house did not echo with betrayal. My name is Martin Cole. But to my wife Laura and our daughter Caroline, I was simply husband and father. The steady pair of hands that carried us through every storm. We lived in a modest 2-story house on the edge of Portland, Oregon. Not the fanciest neighborhood, but close enough to the river that we could hear the foghorns on quiet nights. Laura loved that sound. She said it reminded her that even in darkness, there was guidance somewhere out there. I met Laura when I was 24, fresh from the shipyard, my palms calloused and my back already aching from steel beams and welding arcs. She was working at a local library, surrounded by books that smelled of dust and hope. I remember standing in line just to ask about a manual I did not need, just so I could hear her voice again. We married a year later, and from the start, our lives were built on sacrifice. She worked days cataloging books while I took double shifts at the yard. On Sundays, we collapsed into each other on the couch, promising that one day it would all feel easier. Caroline came 5 years later, a small girl with her mother's green eyes and my stubborn jaw. I swore I would give her everything we never had. Laura wanted to name her after her grandmother, and I agreed without hesitation. We painted her nursery pale yellow, the cheapest paint we could find, but to us it looked like gold. I would come home past midnight, boots heavy with dust, and still tiptoe into her room just to watch her chest rise and fall. In those moments, I believed every ache in my body had a purpose. As the years passed, I became the man people called dependable. I never missed a day of work unless I was bleeding or broken. I fixed neighbors' roofs without asking for payment. I coached Caroline's little league even though I had no idea how to throw a curveball. Laura laughed at me every Saturday morning when I tried to braid Caroline's hair before practice, my big fingers fumbling with the ribbons. We did not have much, but we had love that seemed unshakable. The house itself became our anchor. Every corner held our sweat. I laid each board of the hardwood floor after 12-hour shifts, hammer echoing into the night. Laura sewed curtains on a second-hand machine she bought at a yard sale. She would sit by the window humming while Caroline played with blocks at her feet. On Christmas mornings, I roasted the cheapest ham I could afford, but to us it tasted like a feast. Caroline would tear through wrapping paper with squeals so bright it made me forget the bank notices on the fridge. By the time Caroline turned 16, we had weathered plenty. I borrowed against the house to pay for her braces, then again for her college tuition. I told Laura I did not mind the debt. I told myself that a daughter's smile and future were worth more than any dollar. Laura would massage my shoulders at night, whispering that I was giving too much, but I shook my head and said, "She deserves better than we ever had." That was the creed of my life. To work until my bones cracked. If it meant Caroline could walk freely, without the weight I had carried. When Laura fell ill years later, the house changed. It became both sanctuary and hospital. I watched her fade in the very bedroom we had shared for 3 decades. She asked me one thing before she closed her eyes for the last time. "Promise me, Martin," she whispered. "Promise you won't let them take advantage of you. Promise you'll protect yourself." I kissed her forehead and said I would. I thought I understood. But grief makes a man forgetful. And love for a child can blind even the sharpest eyes. For the first few years after Laura's death, Caroline was my comfort. She called often, checked in, sat with me on the porch when the evenings were long. I believed she missed her mother as much as I did. I believed she saw me as her anchor still. What father does not want to think his child's heart is tied to his own? Invitations grew fewer. Phone calls shorter. Her husband, Daniel, always had a new reason for them to leave quickly. I ignored the signs, telling myself they were busy building their own lives. I never once imagined that those lives might be built on my back, with the intent of pushing me aside. Now, when I look back at those years before betrayal, I realize I was living in a house full of echoes. Every nail I drove, every dollar I gave, every promise I kept was meant to protect a family I believed would always protect me in return. I was wrong. I began to notice changes that did not look like love. They looked like planning. Caroline started calling my home clutter, even though it was the same place she begged me to keep after Laura died. She moved through the rooms with a gentle smile and a small notebook. She made lists of things to donate for my peace of mind. Daniel stood in the doorway like a foreman and tapped the old piano with his knuckle, as if it were a line item. They brought a smart speaker as a gift. It arrived with a camera I never asked for. Daniel set it by the kitchen door and linked it to their phones, because that would be safer. When they left, I turned it toward the wall. When they came back, it was facing the room again. He said the device had auto-calibration and laughed as if I were a child who worried too much. On the porch one evening, Caroline unfolded glossy brochures for a place with a heated pool and a hair salon and something called memory care. "Think of it like a resort," she said, placing her hand over mine. "You would have people around. No more quiet dinners by yourself." The pages showed men my age playing chess in a bright sunroom. The word care sat on every page like a shadow that would not step aside. Money became a new language between us. Daniel offered to help with paperwork. He asked for my online banking so he could switch my utilities to autopay. I told him the bills were set in their ways. Just like me. He did not laugh. He came back with a spreadsheet that mapped my accounts and assets and said, "Liquidity is important at this stage. Equity trapped in a house is not working for you." He opened a real estate app and pulled up sales near the river and said the market was perfect. Caroline spoke about safety every visit. "Dad, have you thought about a medical alert bracelet?" "Dad, a spare key for emergencies would make me sleep better." "Dad, can Daniel be listed as an emergency contact at the bank?" Each question was kind and reasonable. Each one pushed a boundary half an inch. I told myself this was care. It felt like testing a fence to see where it might give. One Saturday, she arrived with a folder of legal pamphlets. Durable power of attorney. Healthcare proxy. Living will. "We can go over these together," she said, her voice light as steam from the kettle. It is smart to have a plan. I traced the bold boxes that waited for my signature. In a margin, a sticky note peeked out with Daniel's handwriting that read, "Fill this while he is in a good mood." Caroline slid the note away when she saw my eyes. "He is organized," she said. My coffee went cold in my hands. Small mishaps became evidence that I was slipping. I left the porch light on after sunrise and they photographed it. I placed a screwdriver in the pantry by mistake, and Daniel held it up like a lawyer showing proof. "We worry," he said. "We just want you safe." The word safe arrived so often that it wore out its kindness. It began to sound like a key that fit a lock. I did not know they had changed. At dinner, Daniel raised a glass to fresh starts. He told a story about a colleague whose father sold his house and moved into a community with full support. He called it dignity. He repeated that word until it felt like glass in my mouth. Caroline pushed peas around her plate and finally said, almost to the plate, "When you are in a place with people your age, we could breathe a little." I looked up, and she did not meet my eyes. They began counting things. Steps to the corner store. Days between my check-ins. The minutes it took me to answer the door. Daniel timed my kettle and said I should not use the stove anymore. He bought a hot plate and called it modern. He unplugged the stove when they left. I plugged it back in and boiled water out of spite just to hear it sing. On a Sunday in March, Caroline drove me to a free clinic for a wellness check. I sat in a small room with cheerful posters, while a man who called himself Dr. Randall asked about sleep and appetite. He slid into memory questions with a smile that was too patient. 3 words to repeat. Today's date. The name of the president. I answered each one and watched his pen check every box. When Caroline stepped out to take a call, he lowered his voice and said, "Families often need guidance at this stage." I told him I needed coffee. After the clinic, we stopped at a cafe. Caroline reached across the table and pressed my fingers the way Laura used to do when she needed me to be brave. "There is a seminar on Tuesday," she said. "Estate planning for seniors. No pressure. We can listen." I went because I wanted to trust her. A man in a blue blazer handed me a packet and asked if Caroline was my authorized representative. She answered before I could. Yes. I let it pass because I was tired and because I thought love excused small shortcuts. Neighbors began to notice odd things. Mrs. Alvarez asked if I was moving because she had seen Daniel taking photos of my yard from 3 angles. Mr. Pike asked if I was renting the place because Caroline had asked about property records at City Hall. "Such a smart daughter," he said. "Knows her way around forms." I smiled and went inside and closed the door with the softest click I could manage. The click sounded like a line drawn with a dull pencil. The day before the truth broke open, Daniel stood at my bay window with a real estate app glowing in his palm. "This neighborhood is peaking," he said in a voice people use in churches. "If we play it right, we can catch the wave." I asked who he was. He did not answer. He zoomed in on a house 6 blocks away and said its sale price beat last spring by 20%. Caroline watched us from the kitchen with a careful face. She walked over and placed her head on my shoulder the way she did when she was a child. For a moment I wanted to believe her weight was love. Then I felt her breath steady and measured, as if she were timing the moment. Seeds of betrayal are not loud. They are tidy. They come dressed as care and progress, and adult children being responsible. They arrive with charts and soft hands, and the steady drum of your age used against you. By the time the phone call slipped through a crack in their kindness, the ground had already tilted under my feet. I did not fall then. Not yet. But I felt the tilt and knew the earth would not stop moving. It happened on a Tuesday night. Quiet and ordinary. I had just finished a bowl of soup that tasted more of salt than anything else. The television murmured in the corner, showing the evening news. When the phone rang, Caroline's name lit the screen. I answered, happy to hear her voice. But she was in a rush. She asked the usual questions about my health, about whether I had eaten, about if the lights were working. Then she said she had to go because Daniel was waiting. We exchanged I love yous, and the line went silent, or so I thought. I was about to set the receiver down when voices spilled through. She had not ended the call properly. I heard her laugh. Light, but strained. Then Daniel's voice. Firm. Almost clipped. He said, "It's time. He's slipping. If we don't move now, the market will cool," Caroline answered. "Dad left the stove on last week. He's becoming a danger to himself. The house is worth nearly $900,000. If we sell quickly, we can buy that place near the lake. I would freighting for there." The soup in my stomach turned to stone. My hand froze around the receiver. They spoke as though I were a burden measured in square footage. They spoke as though my life was an asset to be liquidated. Caroline's voice softened. But the words cut deeper than steel. "He won't fight us. He trusts me completely. He'll sign anything if I frame it as care." "I would favor," Daniel chuckled. "Then it's settled. We get him into a facility. Something clean but not too pricey. And the rest goes toward our future." Obast. I pressed the receiver so hard to my ear that the plastic cracked. My own daughter. The same girl whose fever I had soothed with cold cloths. The same girl I had carried on my shoulders through county fairs. She was planning to lock me away. To erase me from the house I had built with my own hands. The walls around me seemed to lean closer. As if they too had heard the betrayal. Laura's photograph stared at me from the mantel. Her eyes, kind even in stillness, seemed to ask if I remembered my promise. The promise not to let anyone take advantage of me. The promise to protect myself when she was gone. My chest tightened until I thought it might split open. I sat there long after the call ended. The dial tone buzzing like a cruel reminder. My mind raced through years of sacrifices. The double shifts. The loans. The nights without sleep so Caroline could go to college. The weekends I spent building her dream bedroom. Painting it the color she wanted. Even when I could barely lift my arms. Every memory. Once sweet. Now twisted into proof of how far I had fallen in her eyes. I walked through the house, touching each piece of furniture, each frame on the wall, each mark carved by years of living. I remembered Caroline's laughter echoing in the hallway, Laura's hands guiding me as we chose curtains together, the birthdays and anniversaries we celebrated under this roof. This house was not a financial asset. It was the vessel of our lives. And yet to them, it was only numbers on a page. When I reached the bedroom, I sank onto the edge of the bed where Laura had taken her last breath. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the closet. I buried my face in her scarf and whispered, "They think I'm weak. They think I'm blind. Tell me, Laura, what should I do?" Silence answered me. But it was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of every nail I had driven, every dollar I had spent. Every promise I had made. For hours, I wrestled with disbelief and grief. I told myself, maybe I had misheard. Maybe they were only speaking out of fear. But the cold precision in Daniel's tone and the calculation in Caroline's words left no doubt. They were not talking about care. They were talking about profit. By midnight, my tears had dried into something harder. Rage. Yes. But also clarity. They had underestimated me. They thought age had dulled my mind. But my hands still knew the weight of a hammer. My heart still knew the worth of dignity. They would not take from me what I had bled to build. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the living room with Laura's photograph beside me, the shadows long on the walls, and decided, if they saw me as a burden, I would show them I was still a man with choices. I would not wait to be erased. I would act. I made tea at 2 a.m. because water on a stove gave me courage. I was done being managed. I would not let my years be traded for a down payment on their dream. I started with paper, bank statements, tax returns, the deed. Laura kept everything in tidy folders with labels that still made my throat tighten. I made my own labels that night. Protect house, protect cash, protect self. At 6, I called a number Laura had filed under legal. It belonged to an attorney named Andrea Sloan, elder law and real estate. Her receptionist said she could see me at 9. Bring identification. Bring documents. Bring your questions. I carried a canvas bag that once brought books home from Laura's library. Andrea's office sat in a brick building near the courthouse. Andrea was in her 50s with quiet eyes and a voice that did not rush. She let me tell the story. When I finished, she did not give me pity. She gave me facts. Your home is in your name alone. No one can sell it without your consent. No one can put you in a facility without a court order. Guardianship is difficult when a person is competent. Do not sign a power of attorney. Do not add anyone to your accounts. Change your passwords today. Add two-step verification. If you wish to sell the house, you may. If you wish to keep it, you may. The choice belongs to you. Air returned to my chest. I asked what would happen if Caroline tried to act for me. Andrea slid a form across the desk. You can sign a letter revoking any informal permissions. Put your wishes in writing. Keep a record. Dates. Calls. Small facts that show you make your own decisions. She gave me a list for the week. Contact the bank. Freeze. Credit. Update beneficiary forms. I told her the house had become a ghost. I told her I could not look at the hallway without hearing their plans. Andrea listened. She did not push me either way. Some clients stay and set rules. Others sell and start over. Both are valid. A clean sale to a cash buyer can finish in 10 days if the title is clear. She offered 2 agents she trusted and warned me to be discreet. I left with a folder and a spine I had not felt in months. I walked to the bank 2 blocks away. We set new passwords. We added a code word only I would know. He linked my accounts to a simple flip phone I bought on the spot. No family plan. No shared cloud. He set alerts for any withdrawal over $50. I signed a note that no one but me could make changes. On the way home, I bought a deadbolt set. At the kitchen table, I made a plan that fit on 1 page. Today, call agents and box documents, and photograph rooms for my own record. Tomorrow, get a post office box and cancel the landline they always call. The day after tomorrow, meet an agent and hear numbers. If the numbers make sense, sign authorization. If they do not, wait. In every square, I wrote my reason. Dignity, safety, peace. By afternoon, I had spoken to both agents Andrea named. One sounded like a commercial. The other asked about Laura before he asked about square feet. I chose the second. His name was Owen Park. He said he could come by at 4 to walk the property and give a price range. Quick as possible, he said. But quick requires resolve. I told him I carried resolve in my pocket like a pocket knife. When I hung up, the house looked different. Not smaller, not larger, just honest. I saw the nail lines where I had misjudged a stud and patched the drywall. I saw the stain on the baseboard from the winter. The pipe burst. I packed Laura's jewelry box, her silver locket, the wedding band I still wore on a chain. I wrapped them in an old handkerchief and laid them in a shoebox I labeled Keep. I added our marriage license and a photo of Caroline with cake on her face at her 5th birthday. At 3:55, Owen knocked. Plain suit. Clean shoes. A notebook held like a tool. He took off his shoes without asking. He admired the woodwork and asked which parts I had done myself. All of it, I said. He showed me recent sales and spoke in numbers I could follow. He suggested a price that made me blink. He explained why. School zone. Condition. Low inventory. Then he said words that mattered more than price. We move at your pace. You decide everything. I told him about the open phone line. I said I needed this to be quiet until it was finished. He nodded. Most cash buyers prefer quiet. He had a list of them. He could make calls as soon as I signed a minimal agreement. I signed. The pen felt heavy and right. Owen said he would call me within a day with an offer if the buyers liked what they saw. The title company would handle the search. We could ask for a short rent back if I needed time to move. I told him I did not need much. I needed a clean cut. When he left, I changed the deadbolts. The new lock clicked like a full stop at the end of a long sentence. I sat in Laura's chair with the new phone in my pocket and the folder on my lap. I did not feel old or broken. I felt like a man who had finally remembered his promise. I promised Laura I would protect myself. I promised myself I would not be erased. Tonight, those promises were not words. They were tools. I would use them. The night after I signed with Owen, I could not sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like a memory packing itself into a box. I sat at the dining table with Laura's scarf folded in my lap, whispering to her as though she were still across from me. It's time. Love. They think they own my future, but I'll show them I still have a choice. Then, I began sorting the house the way a builder sorts lumber. Keep. Discard. Maybe. I filled one box with letters Laura had written me during our early years. Another with photographs from Caroline's childhood. Every item I touched had weight. The dollhouse I built for Caroline when she was 7 still carried scratches from her toy horses. I ran my finger along the marks and felt my throat close. But I knew not everything could come with me. I chose carefully, knowing each object would either anchor me or chain me. By morning, Owen had left a message. A cash buyer wanted to see the property that afternoon. I wiped down counters until my arms ached. I straightened cushions, polished the banister, and opened windows to let the spring air clear away years of grief. It felt less like cleaning and more like preparing for a trial, as though the walls themselves would testify on my behalf. The buyer arrived at 2. A man in his 40s, with the calm confidence of someone who spends other people's money. He admired the craftsmanship, the oak floors, the custom shelves. He barely asked about me, but his eyes widened when Owen mentioned the house was original owner. Well maintained. He shook my hand firmly and said, "We can move fast. Within hours." Owen called again. An offer stood. $885,000. Cash. Closing in 10 days. I sat in silence, staring at the number scribbled on a notepad. More money than I had ever seen at once. More than Caroline and Daniel imagined when they whispered about their future. I met Owen the next morning at the title office. The paperwork was dense, but years of reading blueprints had taught me how to study details. Every clause, every line. I examined with the care of a man who knows this is his shield. I initialed. I signed. I pressed ink onto paper that carried my freedom. The notary smiled kindly and said, "Congratulations." I nodded, though my chest felt torn open. Walking out into the sunlight, I remembered Laura's last words. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you." I had finally kept that promise. My steps felt lighter. The weight of deception had shifted off my shoulders and onto theirs, waiting to crush them when they returned. But preparation meant more than contracts. I needed a place to go, a safe harbor. I drove across town to a senior apartment complex recommended by Andrea. Clean, modest, with small kitchens and wide hallways. Nothing fancy, but it smelled of fresh paint and bread from a nearby bakery. I spoke with the manager, a brisk woman named Mrs. Carter, who showed me a 1-bedroom unit available immediately. I signed a lease on the spot, paying cash for the first month and deposit. Keys jingled in my pocket like a new beginning. Back at the house, I continued to pack. I chose Laura's jewelry box, her recipe cards smudged with flour, and a quilt she sewed our first winter here. I left behind furniture too heavy to carry. The sofa where Caroline once fell asleep with crayons in her hands. The bed frame Laura picked out at a thrift shop. I whispered goodbye to each piece. Not because wood could hear, but because my heart needed to say it. That evening I phoned the bank. I arranged for the sale proceeds to be wired into a new account, separate from everything Caroline might know. The banker asked if I wanted joint ownership. I nearly laughed. Just me, I said. My voice was steady, almost defiant. I also visited a locksmith, paying in cash to change every lock after the sale closed. No paper trail. No chance for Caroline and Daniel to slip in with their old keys. Control was mine again. One careful step at a time. By the third night, the house looked different. Bare walls where photos once hung. Cardboard boxes stacked like soldiers waiting for orders. I sat on the floor of the empty living room, staring at the outline where the rug had been. It struck me then. I was not just preparing to leave a house. I was preparing to leave behind the version of myself that allowed betrayal to grow unchecked. Preparation is not glamorous. It is measured in boxes taped shut, passwords rewritten, signatures pressed into paper. But it is also the quiet reclaiming of power. With each decision, I felt the balance shift. They thought I was drifting toward confusion. Instead, I was sharpening into clarity. When Caroline and Daniel returned, they would not find the weak man they believed in. They would find locks changed, papers signed, and a father who had chosen his own path. They would learn that preparation, done in silence, can be the loudest answer of all. Execution began in quiet steps. No drama, no speeches, only lists, phone calls, signatures, and a steady pulse in my wrist that said, "Keep going." Owen called at 9. The buyer had confirmed. Cash. Closing in 10 days. I asked for wire instructions in writing and a courtesy day to finish moving. He said yes. I wrote the time and date on my yellow pad and drew a small square next to the word done. I drove to the post office and rented a box. New address. New key. Forward all mail. The clerk stamped forms without asking questions. Outside, I stood in the sun and felt a strange lightness, like a knot loosening one thread at a time. At the bank, I opened a new account with a new number. I asked for alerts on every transaction. I asked for a banker who answered the phone. They assigned me Miss Patel, who looked me in the eye and said, "I will pick up." I believed her. I wrote her name on my pad and circled it twice. I bought a prepaid smartphone with cash. No family plan. No shared cloud. The clerk helped me set it up under the name M. Cole. I downloaded one app for one purpose. A small camera I had ordered would talk to that app and show me a door, a note, and two faces realizing a lesson. I hired a moving crew for a half day. 2 men arrived in a blue truck, their shirts damp with work. "Label what's yours," the foreman said. "We'll pack and stack." I handed him a list. "Not a scratch on the boxes marked Laura," I said. He nodded and taped the corners twice. We filled the truck with my life, stripped to essentials. Photo albums, letters, tools I could not leave behind. The quilt, the jewelry box, a dented kettle that sang like a bird when water boiled. I rented a storage unit for Caroline and Daniel's things. I did not throw their belongings out. I made an inventory, printed 2 copies, signed both, and slid one into an envelope with their names. I paid the first month in cash and wrote the address and locker number on my pad. Fair is not weakness. It is a line I draw so I can live with myself. On day 8, I met Owen at the title office. A stack of documents waited on a polished table. The buyer's attorney shook my hand. The notary asked for my ID and watched my pen touch every page. I read each line. Occupancy. Disclosures. Dates. Wire to Miss Patel's bank. I took my time. When I finished, the notary stamped and smiled. "Congratulations," she said. I walked outside into a blue sky and breathed like a man who had been underwater too long. Back at the house, I set a small charger by the front hall outlet. Inside, the charger hid the camera. It watched the entry and the note I would tape to the glass. I tested the app. The image sharpened. The microphone picked up my breath. I moved my hand through the frame. The screen on my new phone showed a hand moving through light and dust. "Good," I said aloud. "You will see what I see." As nigh, I wrote the note in my neat, careful hand. No rage. No insults. Only truths that stood on their own feet. "Caroline and Daniel, I heard your plan. I know you called me a burden. The house is sold. The money is safe. Your belongings are stored at Rivergate Storage. Unit 215. Take 30 days to collect them. Do not contact me about the house. Do not come after my accounts. You will find nothing to take." I raised you with open hands. You answered with closed fists. This is me opening my hands again. But this time, I opened them to let go. "Dad." I read it twice. I did not cross out a word. I taped the envelope at eye level where the light falls in the afternoon. I changed the locks again the night before closing. New cylinders, to replace the new ones. The locksmith did not ask why. He worked fast, wiped his tools, and said, "These are good. Hard to pick." I paid cash. He tipped his cap and drove away. I moved into Mrs. Carter's one-bedroom at dusk. The hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh bread. My unit held a small bed, a small table, a chair by a window that faced west. I set Laura's photo on the nightstand and whispered, "I made it. Love." The room was plain, but it was mine. Not a holding pen, not a quiet prelude to being managed. Mine. The wire landed the next morning. "Miss Patel called to confirm. Funds received," she said. My body loosened so suddenly I had to sit down. "Thank you," I told her. 2 words. But they filled the room. I bought a simple suit and a new pair of shoes. Not for court. Not for a wedding. For a man who would walk away from a house with his head up. I packed the suit in a garment bag and ironed a white shirt in the apartment's small kitchen. The iron hissed like a soft warning, and then went calm. I spent the last night at the house alone with boxes and echoes. I walked each room and touched each wall. In the kitchen, I placed Laura's recipe card for bread on the counter and traced the smudges where dough had stuck to her fingers. In the living room, I sat on the bare floor and remembered Caroline's birthday candles. The way she squeezed her eyes shut to wish. In our bedroom, I stood where Laura's last breath had warmed my hands and said, "I kept my promise. It's deceptive, the crash." At dawn, I loaded the last box into my car and drove to the new apartment. I set the prepaid phone on the table. The camera app showed an empty hallway and a closed door. A small square of tape glowed against the glass. The note waited like a match before the strike. I made coffee. I waited. I counted heartbeats and watched the screen. At 4:17 in the afternoon, a shape crossed the frame. Headlights cut across the wall. A car door slammed. 2 shadows moved up the steps. I built the spring. Caroline turned 12. Caroline reached for her keys. The metal flashed in the lens. She pushed the key into a lock that no longer knew her. The key stopped. She tried again. Daniel stepped beside her and took the ring from her hand. He tried the back door. He tried the garage. Every lock said no. On my screen, I watched their faces turn from confusion to fear. Then, Caroline saw the envelope. Her fingers shook. She peeled it from the glass. She opened it. Her mouth moved around the words I had written. She made a small sound, like a child swallowing a stone. I did not smile. I simply placed my hand on the table and breathed. The plan was no longer a plan. It was real. It was done. And I was still myself inside it. Caroline's lips moved as her eyes tracked the words of my letter. I could see the tremor in her jaw through the tiny camera lens. Daniel leaned closer, his face tightening with every line. When she finished, her hand fell to her side. The paper crumpled like a fallen leaf. Daniel snatched it and read for himself. His brows pulled tight. And when he reached the final sentence, he cursed under his breath. He folded the paper once, twice, as if by crushing it he could erase what it said. Caroline's voice came through the speaker on my phone, thin and breaking. He sold it. He actually sold it. The money's gone. Matterly Devil. Daniel slammed his palm against the doorframe. That old man just played us. 885,000. He kept it all. Mather. Their suitcases sat abandoned on the porch, the same porch where Laura once grew geraniums in cracked clay pots. Caroline dropped onto the step, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Daniel paced the walkway, his phone out, already dialing. We'll find him. We'll track every account. It's direction, but I had already erased my trail. The landline was disconnected. My cell was new and anonymous. My mail now lived in a locked box at the post office. Every thread they pulled would end in a knot. Caroline lifted her head, mascara streaking her cheeks. How could he do this to me? I'm his daughter. On Nutter. Daniel barked a laugh with no humor. You should have handled him better. You should have had him sign the power of attorney when we put it in front of him. Now he slipped away. On Nutter. Her anger flared. Me. You're the one who kept pushing for the sale. Pushing for the nursing home. You said he wouldn't notice. That he was too old to fight back. On Nutter. He shot back. Well, he noticed, and now we're out of a house and nearly $1 million. She ready how? Their words twisted into accusations, each one sharper than the last. Caroline accused Daniel of being reckless, of losing his job and clinging to her father's house as a solution. Daniel threw her failures back at her. The credit card bills. The nights she spent shopping while calling it stress relief. I listened, not with joy, but with a grim finality. Betrayal eats its own. They had betrayed me. And now they turned the same teeth on each other. Caroline stood and pounded on the locked door with her fist. Dad, talk to me. You can't just disappear. Her voice cracked, the tone slipping back to the little girl who once called me her hero. But the house stayed silent. As planned, no one lived there anymore. The keys in her pocket were relics to a life she had tried to steal. Daniel yanked the handle one last time. Then he threw the crumpled letter onto the porch boards and muttered, We're wasting time. He's gone. He played us. There is naughty. Caroline scooped the letter back up, smoothing it with trembling fingers. We can fight this. There must be a way. There is naughty. Fight what? Daniel spat. He owned the house. He sold it. It's legal. Unless you want to take your own father to court for being competent. There is naughty. The word competent stung me even through the phone. It was the very thing they had doubted. Now Daniel said it like an accusation. Caroline dropped into silence. She pressed the letter to her chest and stared at the closed door as though she could will it to open. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But there was no one to wipe them away. At last, Daniel dragged the suitcases down the steps. We have no place to go. Caroline, my lease is done. Your apartment's gone. That house was our future. Is way. Her reply was a whisper. It was never ours. It was his. It is not of the Turn Main. They stood in the yard, small against the house that had raised her. The house she thought she could claim. Their argument faded into the hum of traffic. Then they hauled the suitcases into their car. The doors slammed. The engine started. They drove away, leaving the porch light burning against the evening sky. I set the phone down on my small apartment table. My hands shook, not with fear, but with the weight of finality. I had seen enough. The plan had held. The locks had held. And my dignity had held. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. Outside, the street lamps glowed against the Portland dusk. I whispered to Laura's photograph. They came back. Love. But they found nothing to take. Only themselves. And dressed her. I did not chase them. I did not bang on a door that no longer knew me. I confronted them in the only way that kept me whole. I dialed my prepaid phone and sent one message to both numbers I knew by heart. It contained the storage address, the unit number, and a private link. The link opened a video I had recorded at my new kitchen table. Date and time stamped in the corner so there would be no doubt. In the video, I looked straight into the lens. I spoke slowly, the way I used to give safety briefings at the yard. I said I heard the call. I said the word burden had split me open. I said the sale was lawful. The funds were safe. And all informal permissions were revoked. I said, any contact, from now on, must be in writing to my post office box. I said I would accept one meeting in a neutral office with a counselor or with my attorney present. I ended with 7 words that tasted like salt and steel. I love you. But I will not be used. They watched it. I knew from the read receipt and from the way my phone rang not 10 minutes later. I let it ring 3 times and answered. Caroline spoke first. Her voice shook. Dad. Please. We can talk. We can fix this. You did not have to go that far. I listened. I heard the old tenderness flicker and fade. I said, Caroline, I am willing to hear you in writing. I will not negotiate on the phone. There was a gasp. Then Daniel's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. You think a video makes you a hero. You think a cashier's check makes you untouchable. We can challenge competence. We can challenge intent. I kept my tone even. You can try. You will fail. I ended the call and put the phone face down like a tool I no longer needed. I drove to the storage facility and parked where I could see the gate without being seen. The unit door was closed. The lock new. The key with the manager. An envelope waited for them in the office. Signed receipts inside. An inventory with every item listed. And a second letter addressed to each by hand. Fair is not weakness. It is the line I stand on so I can bear my own reflection. They arrived just after 6. Headlights cutting across the concrete like tired eyes. Daniel stalked ahead. Caroline followed, paper in her hands. Mascara washed to gray by a day of tears. The manager checked their IDs and gave them the keys with 2 glances that said more than words. They lifted the door. The light flicked on. The boxes were neat and labeled. Laura. Kitchen. Guest room. Office. A small stack stood apart. Caroline keeps. Inside were the photos. The costume jewelry she loved as a girl. The quilt Laura made when September turned cold. I had chosen those with both hands shaking. They found the second letter. I watched them stand almost shoulder to shoulder. The old habit rising for a moment before blame pushed it away. Caroline read aloud in a voice that did not trust itself. I have given you what is yours. I have kept what is mine. I will not discuss the sale. I will accept an apology written in your own words. No threats. No conditions. If you wish to repair what can be repaired, Ask for a meeting through the post office box. If you wish to continue as you have, do not contact me again. My love for you is not a door for you to walk through with muddy feet. Daniel scoffed. He called me manipulative. He said the word competent as if it were an insult. He paced, phone in hand, already searching for a lawyer who would take a hopeless case. Caroline sank to a crate labeled bedroom and pressed her fingers to her temples the way Laura used to do when a migraine rose. I remembered that gesture. I remembered that child. I felt my resolve hold, and my chest hurt in the same breath. They argued again. The sound was muffled by distance and metal. But I knew the cadence. Blame. Defense. Old secrets dragged into new air. He said I was never going to get hired back. She said you told me it was a sabbatical. He said your father always liked you more. She said at least he respected work. The manager glanced toward my car as if he sensed a witness. I stayed where I was. I had no right to enter their storm. I had only the right to stand by the boundary I built. When they were done shouting, only breathing filled the space. Caroline touched the box marked Caroline Keeps. She opened the top and saw the dollhouse door I had carved to match our bay window. She put her fingers on the tiny frame and closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, I saw the 5-year-old who asked me to lift her so she could see the moon. The ache in me rose like a wave and broke. I let it. Then I let it pass. My phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. No threats. No bargaining. Only a sentence that landed like a stone in a quiet pond. I am sorry for the call. I was wrong. I deserve what happened. I did not answer. Not yet. I needed her apology to live longer than a panic. I needed it on paper. In ink. With the calm of night behind it and the light of morning in front of it. They closed the unit. They thanked the manager in voices that had lost their edges. They drove away. I stayed a while longer, watching the gate, watching the last sunlight slip off the roofline. In the rearview mirror, I was an old man with a new spine. My hands looked like my father's hands. My face looked like the years had finally lined up the way they were always meant to. Back at the apartment, I set the phone on the table and opened the window to let in the smell of rain. I brewed tea. I placed Laura's photo where she could see the chair I chose. I told her what happened. I told her I did not yell. I told her I did not beg. I told her I spoke the truth and then stood inside it. I am not a ghost to be stored for convenience. I am not a wallet to be opened on command. I am a father who loved too much and finally learned where love must stop to remain love. When the steam faded, I wrote a short note on a clean sheet of paper. Thank you for your message. Please write a letter and mail it to the box we discussed. After I receive it, I will consider a meeting with a counselor present. I signed my name with a steady hand and sealed it for morning. Confrontation, I realized, is not always fire. Sometimes it is a closed gate and a light left on for the ones who still might find their way. The morning after their visit to the storage unit, I walked to the post office. The clerk handed me an empty box with my number painted in black. No letter yet. No apology. Only silence. I carried it home like proof that choices carry weight. In my apartment, life moved at a slower, cleaner rhythm. I made coffee in a small pot Laura never touched, so it did not sting with memory. I stacked the boxes neatly against the wall. Every evening I opened one and set something in place. A framed photo of Caroline as a child went on the desk. Laura's cookbook sat by the stove, though I had not cooked from it since she died. These items felt like survivors with me, not ghosts. I began to notice how quiet dignity feels. No footsteps upstairs. No voices calling me forgetful. No one timing how long it took to answer the door. Only the sound of my own breath and the creak of a chair that belonged to no one else. I realized I was not lonely. I was free. Yet freedom came with grief. I walked past the old house once, staying across the street. A moving truck was parked out front. Strangers carried in new furniture. A young boy chased a ball down the porch steps, laughing. His laughter cut me, not because it was wrong, but because it was pure. That house was no longer a stage for betrayal. It was becoming someone else's home. I whispered a blessing under my breath and kept walking. Caroline's silence stretched into a week. Then an envelope arrived at my box. Her handwriting, familiar as my own, leaned across the page. Dad, I'm sorry. I don't deserve forgiveness. I wanted security, and I let Daniel push me further than I ever thought I'd go. I see now what I did to you. If you never speak to me again, I'll understand, but I love you. And I am ashamed. I am me. I read it 3 times. The ink smeared where a tear had fallen. It was not enough to undo the wound, but it was something living, fragile. Reaching toward me, I placed it in Laura's jewelry box beside her locket. For now, that was where it belonged, near her. Safe, but not yet answered. Daniel never wrote. Not a word. Not a text. His silence was its own confession. I stopped waiting for him. He had never seen me as more than an obstacle. Caroline, though she was my child, she still might learn. I met Andrea again to review my affairs. She asked if I felt secure. I told her about the apartment, the bank, the locks, the letter. She nodded. What you did is rare. Many of my clients never act until it's too late. Her words carried weight, but I did not feel proud. I felt tired. Betrayal does not make heroes. It makes survivors. At night, I sat by the window with Laura's picture on the sill. I told her about the boy laughing on the porch. I told her about Caroline's letter. I told her about the money now resting in a bank under my control. And I told her I was afraid that in protecting myself, I had lost the last thread tying me to our daughter. The silence after my words was not empty. It was patient, like she was waiting for me to learn that some losses cannot be avoided, only carried. Weeks turned into months. I built routines. Morning coffee at the same cafe. Afternoons reading the paper on a park bench. Evenings cooking small meals and listening to old records. Life shrank, but it felt solid. Like a beam cut to the right length. I had less, but what I had was mine. Sometimes, when the phone buzzed, I half hoped it would be Caroline. But it was usually the bank, the utility company, or a neighbor asking about trash pickup. And maybe that was enough. The wound was not healed, but it was not bleeding either. The aftermath of betrayal is not fire. It is ash. You sift through it for what remains. I found my dignity. I found a measure of peace. Whether I would find my daughter again, I did not know. But at least I had not lost myself. I used to think karma was a large circle that took years to close. Now I think it is many small circles that close every day. A word returns. A choice returns. A silence returns. I see it in the way my apartment holds me without judgment. I see it in the way strangers at the cafe greet me by name and mean it. I see it in the way I can sleep with the window open and not fear the phone in the night. Some evenings I walk by the river where the foghorn calls across the water. Laura loved that sound. I stand with my hands in my pockets and listen. The call is steady. It does not beg. It does not accuse. It simply says, I am here. That is what dignity feels like. It is the right to say I am here without asking permission to remain. Karma also came for Daniel. I did not search for it. News drifts in small ways. A neighbor told a friend who told Mrs. Carter that Daniel moved out of their rental and left Caroline with the bills. A company refused to hire him after a reference check. There were whispers about clients and funds and a file that did not add up. I did not cheer. I poured tea and looked out the window. A man who treats people as tools will one day reach for a tool and find only air. Caroline wrote again. This time the letter was longer and slower. She told me she stopped wearing the watch Daniel bought because it felt like a timer on her wrist. She said she started seeing a counselor. She wrote that she reads to children at the library on Saturdays because the sound of their voices makes her remember who she was before plans replaced love. She did not ask for money. She did not ask to come back to the house. She simply asked if I would consider a meeting with a counselor present. The way I had said, I held the letter for a long time and felt the small circle close. Not a perfect circle, a true one. Andrea helped me choose the counselor. A gentle man with kind eyes who kept a soft clock on his desk. The room smelled of coffee and books. I arrived first and placed Laura's ring in my pocket like a stone to hold. Caroline walked in and did not try to hug me. She sat and folded her hands and looked at the floor. The counselor invited us to speak in turns. I went first. I told her I loved her. I told her I would not excuse what she did. I told her love without boundaries is not love. It is hunger. I told her I had eaten my own heart for a year and called it care. I told her I am done eating what hurts me. I spoke in plain words. I did not raise my voice. I did not bend to soften the truth. Then she spoke. She said she was afraid of time. She said the silence in my house felt like a well and she wanted to fill it with plans. She said Daniel measured every minute and taught her to measure me the same way. She said greed grew like ivy on that fear and she let it climb. She looked at me with red eyes and said she was sorry. Not for the money, not for the house, for turning me into a problem to solve, for forgetting the man who taught her fractions with pennies at our kitchen table. The counselor nodded and asked us to name one boundary each. I said I will not talk about my accounts. I will not be pressured. I will meet again only if we both ask for the meeting in writing. I will leave if I am insulted. She said she will not ask for money. She will not bring Daniel. She will accept a no as a full sentence. We both signed the paper, the counselor wrote. It was not a legal document. It was something better. It was a promise we could see. Karma is not a hammer. It is a mirror. After the session, I stood in my bathroom and looked into my own eyes. I asked if I had ever used love as a lever. I asked if Laura would have told me to forgive. The mirror did not answer. The man in it did. Forgiveness without change is permission. Forgiveness with boundaries is repair. I can hold both truths and still sleep. I met Ms. Patel at the bank and finished the plans I had avoided for years. I set up a trust in Laura's name that will fund apprenticeships at the shipyard, where I learned my trade. I wrote a small scholarship for a library program that buys picture books for children who cannot afford them. I made a will that names Caroline as a beneficiary, but not to cash. She will receive letters and recipes and the quilt. She will receive my journals and a box of tools with a note that says, "Build something that lasts." The money will help hands that build and minds that learn. I felt Laura's approval like sun on my shoulders as I signed. On Sundays, I fix small things around the apartment. A loose hinge, a squeaky drawer. Repair feels like prayer. It is my way of telling the world that broken is not the same as lost. I cook simple meals and clean the pan as soon as I finish. I keep the window open while the evening light fades. The air smells of rain and bread from the bakery downstairs. I think this is what an honest life is. Not grand, not loud, ordered by care, shaped by truth. Caroline and I met a second time. We spoke about small things. Weather, books, a recipe Laura loved. When she cried, I handed her a tissue and did not try to fix the cry. When she smiled, I let myself smile back. I did not give her keys. I did not give her access. I gave her time in a room with a clock and a witness. The circle does not have to be perfect to be closed. If there is a lesson, it is this. Love is not a house to be inherited. Love is work done daily with your own hands. If someone tries to take it without doing the work itself will rise up and stop them. That is karma. Not lightning. Not punishment. Work that remembers who did it. Work that remembers who tried to claim it. I still miss the old house. I miss the dent in the hallway where Caroline crashed her tricycle. I miss the sound of Laura turning pages in the bay window. But when I pass by now, I do not feel erased. I feel released. A new family plays under that roof. Laughter is a fair trade for sorrow. It proves the house was well built. At night, I rest my hand on Laura's scarf and thank her for the promise she asked me to keep. I did. I am safe. I am free. I am not a burden. I am a man who chose himself and still has love left to give. That love is smaller now. It is also stronger. It can be held without being stolen. I woke before dawn and took Laura's recipe card from the drawer. The paper was soft at the edges. I read each line as if it were a prayer. Flour, water, yeast, salt, time. I warmed the small kitchen with the oven and the memory of her hands. I mixed and waited. I folded and waited. I watched the dough rise like a slow breath that did not hurt. When the bread was golden, I set it on the rack. The crust sang as it cooled. I cut 2 slices and wrapped them in a towel. I put Laura's ring in my pocket and the first letter from Caroline in my jacket. I walked to the park where the morning opened like a clean page. Caroline sat on a bench near the pond. She had arrived early. She did not reach for me. I did not rush. We sat with a careful space between us. I gave her the warm towel. She opened it and laughed, a small laugh I had not heard in years. "Mom's bread," she said. We ate in silence. Ducks moved across the water with quiet purpose. I told Caroline I would meet again. I told her I was keeping my boundaries. I told her she could keep the recipe card for a week and then bring it back. She held it with both hands and nodded as if it might break. She asked if I hate her. I said no. Hate is a chain, and I am done wearing chains. I told her I loved her. I told her love needs rules to stay true. She cried without hiding her face. I did not fix the cry. I let it be a bridge that did not need words. When we stood to leave, she gave me Laura's ring from the towel. I closed my fingers over the small circle. A circle can hold. A circle can heal. I watched her walk away with the recipe card pressed to her chest. She stopped once and looked back. I lifted my hand. She lifted hers. That was enough for that morning. Back home, I washed the bowl and the knife. I placed the ring on the nightstand and the towel on the radiator to dry. I opened the window. The city smelled like rain and bread. I told the room that remembers my wife that we are all right. Not perfect. Not broken. All right. I am not waiting for a house to save me. The house is gone. What remains is work and kindness and a spine no one can buy. I am a father who chose dignity and kept a door that love can open. If someone enters, they will wipe their feet. If no one comes, the room will still be warm. Tonight I will sleep with the window open. The foghorn will call from the river. I am here. I am still here. In the morning I will make bread again. Enough for 2 slices. Enough for a small life that is whole.